The topic of this session is the nature and varieties of social power. And because the term social power is very broad, ambiguous, can be interpreted in many different ways, I think it's important that from the beginning we talk a little about what we mean by social power and recognize that the term can be validly used in different ways in different contexts. So we're not excluding anything here. I think the purpose of my presentation is rather than to exclude the use of the term for something, as to broaden it and make clear the breadth and scope of this topic that we're going to be exploring. Our theme is that human beings undertake purposeful activity for accomplishing things. And as far as I know, we do not have a science of human accomplishment. We have a science to tell us how we accomplish in the field of economy or in the field of politics and governance, in the field of military, in the field of education, or how we accomplish our social goals, how we develop culturally and artistically. But we don't have today a fundamental science of how human beings accomplish. And an underlying theme of the courses that we've been going through is to look at the process of human accomplishment at a more fundamental level to see where do our capacities come from, and is there anything common to our different fields of accomplishment, whether it's political, military, economic, social, cultural, artistic, intellectual, academic, whatever it may be. This accomplishment is a broad term. It applies to everything, all the things we seek to accomplish, whether it's to meet our minimum needs, fulfill social aspirations, discover new ideas, explore the universe, create artistically, build civilization and culture. So we're talking about the broadest possible framework of how human beings distinguish themselves from the rest of the species on the planet by organized, systematic levels of accomplishment. And we're trying to get some greater insights into that. Why? Because we seem to have reached a place, a plateau, where for all our phenomenal accomplishments, we've got challenges that we don't seem to be able to grapple with. And if we listen to the ecologists, environmental scientists seriously, as the world is beginning to do now, they're saying we're simply not doing enough. We're not addressing these issues. We've got economic problems despite our enormous rise in standard of living. We've got hundreds of millions of unemployed, more than a billion or two underemployed. We've got rising inequality. We've got persistent poverty. We've still got famine. So we've got real serious problems that for all our science, technology, and sophistication, we're not effectively handling. We've still got nuclear weapons threatening us and aggravating that threat. So the question is, what are the resources we have as a race? What are the capacities we have, and what are the processes by which we have succeeded up until now, so that we can draw on those resources, those capacities, and those processes more effectively than we have up until now to meet challenges which today are quite imposing. This is the underlying theme of the course. And we know when we look back that humanity has extraordinary powers of accomplishment and extraordinary achievements to its credit. If we look at what's happened in the last 2 centuries, it's a mind-boggling change that's taken place in the world. This is charts from 1750 to 2010. World population, we always talk about the great problem of population, but the fact of the matter that the world population could grow from 10 million 10,000 years ago to 100 million at the time of the Roman Empire, to 1 billion in 1800, and now to 7.5 billion, it tells us we're able to feed and develop and extend the life expectancy of people. That is a power, a tremendous power. That has caused more problems for us. But the growth in population reflects an extraordinary increase in our capacity to sustain life on Earth and to feed people and so forth. Urbanization we see, especially since 1950, this tremendous skyrocketing of urbanization. That too is a power to bring people together and organize life off of the land. It used to be we were all on the land because we all had to, were subsisting on the land. Now we're able, with a small percentage of the population, to feed a very large, more than 50% of the world not on the land. So again, some power of accomplishment is there. Global GDP has grown about more than 80-fold, real global GDP, since 1800. Per capita GDP, in spite of a 7.5-fold growth in population, per capita GDP has grown about 12 to 13 times. So each person who's here is also living at a much, much higher level, a standard of living, than before. Foreign direct investment has skyrocketed. The use of energy, which of course is creating tremendous environmental challenges for us. The volume of transportation, this happens to just measure motor vehicles, but however you mention it, we are moving about at a phenomenal pace that humanity never did compared to how we did in the past. Communication, and of course telecommunication is our primary mode. In the year 2000, India had 37 million landline phone connections, which was the result of 45 years of independence. And now it's got nearly 1 billion connections through mobile. So what it took 40 or 50 years to do, or actually 100 years to do, now it has multiplied 20-fold in a decade and a half. And this is, of course, happening all over the world. Dams for tapping water and hydroelectric power, tourism. But this is only we're not saying that all these things are good. All of these things are generating problems, and that's part of the global challenge we have. But what I'm trying to say is we're doing something that enables us to accomplish more than humanity has done in the past. Obviously, it's not enough, or it's not all the right things, and that's what this is a question of. But obviously, there is a power that we're using. And we're calling that social power. Not to say it's social power and not money power or not technological power, but we're trying to look at it in the broadest sense of what is this power that human beings are utilizing, and how can we use it more effectively to solve the challenges that we've created for ourselves. So human beings utilize myriad forms of power, and I've listed a few here just to indicate so that everybody's thoughts are touched. Language is a tremendous power for communication. The use of numbers, which our whole science is based on and our whole commerce is based on. The capacity to organize ourselves, the capacity to defend ourselves, which is critical to the development of civilization, and at earlier stages, the capacity to conquer others, which was a driving force for the growth of civilization. Invention of tools, production, specialization, trade, exchange, communication, transportation, the invention of money, banking and credit, law, governance, the capacity for taxation, urbanization, and so forth, diplomacy, arts, science, research, technological innovation. All of these are expressions of human capacity. All of these are, and not just human capacity individually, but human working together, working as a group, working collectively and building up a capacity for society, locally, regionally, and now globally. All of these are forms for what I have in mind when we use the term social power. And they all have some fundamental things in common. They all arise out of the interaction, cooperation, coordination, and organization between human beings. None of these things, and we'll see as we go further, none of these things are created just by an individual by themselves, even though we're going to discuss on the third day that virtually all of them are created initially by an individual or a small group, and then goes to the society as a whole. But these powers are all the result of our working together. Language is obvious because language has no meaning or value unless we share it in common and we can exchange ideas with each other. Money, we're going to have a session on it. Money has no value at all to anybody on a desert island. It only has value if there's somebody there for you to exchange some type of value with. And of course the internet, which is the marvel we have all grown up to see coming, is really an unprecedented social institution for the networking of human beings. I'd say all of these are also expressions of the capacity of human beings to channel, to release and channel human energy to achieve goals and aspirations of the society. Those are our physical energies, our capacity for hard work, our social energies for interaction, our emotional energies as part of groups and as families, our mental, creative energies, and even our spiritual energies. So we're not just talking at one level, we're talking at all levels. Our collective, the results of civilization and culture is a process of mobilizing our energies and converting it into power at multiple levels, all types of energy expressed in all different fields. I'm only going to briefly mention this because I found it so topical. This is a book recently written by a British historian, John Darwin, after Tamerlane, Rise and Fall of Global Empires from 1400 to 2000. And the reason I'm citing it now and won't go into his fascinating thesis is when he as a historian studies what's happened to the world over the last 5-6 centuries, and he says this is a common perception now among historians of the last 20 years, they're rewriting history. Because there's been a perception for centuries, perhaps, at least a century, of how the West kind of modernized the rest of the world. And now Western historians are revisiting the perspective of what's happened over 600 years and seeing that was really a very limited perspective on how the world was evolving and how it was growing out from different centers. And how it was moving from lower to higher levels of organization, communication, transport, production, exchange, and so forth. And I've simply listed down here the prominent factors that he's documenting in century after century, country and region after region, and showing if we wanted to say, well, our progress of the last 2 centuries is very simple. We had an industrial revolution, or we had 2 industrial revolutions. We discovered steam power. We built the railways. We've got the telegraph, and everything follows from there. I think the view of the historians today is that's a grossly oversimplified view of a very complex process. From the language we're using here, I would say another way of describing it, and he doesn't use this language, but he discusses everything we're going to discuss, says this is humanity learning how to mobilize different forms of social power and doing it on a larger and larger and larger scale, each in combination with the others. A very important point and theme for us. Though by necessity we've divided our discussion into different sessions, none of these powers operate independent of the others. And Darwin makes it very clear in a very easy way to understand. The whole growth of global commercialism over 3 or 4 centuries that led to imperialism, led to the development of colonial rule, and has now led to the globalization of economy, could not have been possible had it not been for the tremendous developments in transportation and communication. In fact, the biggest challenge for the early merchants was, unless they had a navy to support them and to accompany them, they had no power. They had no power to defend themselves or to open up commercial routes. In fact, you could turn it around, because much of the history of the colonial and imperial period was it was the navy that came in and opened up the trade, compelled the gates to open, and then the commerce came. And of course, it's more complex than that. But I think when we hear the different sessions, we should keep in mind always, no matter how much we focus on one, all of these powers are being developed simultaneously. All of them are interacting, either in mutually reinforcing or mutually contradicting each other at the same time. And we hope to come out of this not with a great clarity, because this is a complex field and a nascent discussion, but with a greater appreciation of the complexity, the richness, and for me, the greater appreciation of the enormous potential that we have that we're not fully tapping even today. So, we had a meeting on this. Our second meeting at the Brubnik was a 6-day meeting. We called it, for want of a better term, towards a transdisciplinary theory of society. And there we talked about, is there a common process behind human accomplishment in all fields? And one of the many very interesting conclusions we came to is that we could describe human progress in all fields as a process of increasing awareness, consciousness, increasing capacity to release and mobilize our human energies, to fulfill aspirations, to organize those energies socially, individually, in groups, in our personalities and in the collective, and to express those energies. And this is a recurrent, this process involves all the forms of energy and all the fields of expression that we're going to be discussing during this session. And what is the source of those energies? For want of a better term, I'm saying society is the source of all those energies. And we're not going to try to come out with a finally satisfying definition of what society is. Sociologists have been doing it for ages, and it keeps undergoing evolution. But I think all the conceptions of society really at least fall into 3 main categories. If you talk to I'm American, and many of my colleagues I've talked to in America, society is really a collection of individuals. Our focus, when we know there's a society, but the real focus is on we're lots of people, individuals. I think when you come to Europe, and certainly more when you come to Europe, we're much more aware of the collective and the social collective and the institutions and structures and systems and values and customs that bind us together, because here people have been together for a lot longer. They haven't left home and family and everything to go and start in a world where there was nothing, and they had to build up a society from scratch. When you go further east, I've spent decades living in India, you find that the conception of society is not a structure. Society is a living thing. Society is really alive. It's something the individual interacts with. It's a larger whole of which the individual belongs and is really inseparably interconnected. It's not only a system for working, it's not only a mechanism, it's an organism. It's a living organism in itself. We may have different conceptions of this, but I think regardless of what our conception is or the degree to which we're looking at it from a very individualistic or a more organic point of view, the dynamics are the same. This capacity of human beings relating to each other to release and channel and effectively use our energies is really the source of all of the powers that I have mentioned up until now. But that's still not enough of clarity, I think, for us to conceive of how society is structured or organized. And so I've kind of tried to conceive it this way. When we think of society, one of the things that often comes to mind is government, because the government, the military, and law are the most formed structures of the society. They're the places where we really can see the society. We know how it acts. We know what the rules are. This is the most formal structures of society. Of course, you could say at the micro level, that's at the macro level, the family is that too. It's also a very clearly defined structure, though that definition seems to be breaking down somewhat in recent decades. Then we have another layer that's less organized, and I purposely started with the most organized. We have political parties, which are certainly not as clear-cut and organized as the government of which they compose. We have economic activity. We have firms that are very well defined, but the economy itself is loosely defined. It moves in many formal and informal ways. Transportation and communication, the media, our educational system, our health care, our entertainment, and many other areas. We can't say they're unorganized, but they're not as clearly, formally organized and defined as the most structured parts. And then we have something even more informal. We know it exists. We know it's real. And in our discussions, and as in the Academy and the Consortium, and even in Darwin's book, it keeps coming out, some of the most important sources of determinism in the development of humanity are things that are so intangible we're not even sure we can say they exist, but we always come back to them. Our values, our beliefs, our customs, our ways of life, which come under the heading of culture or whatever other term we want to use. And it was very interesting in reading Darwin how much he emphasizes that the whole Western Empire project, which resulted in actually a very brief period historically in Western domination of the world, a few decades really at its peak before it began to unwind, was all made possible by a set of values, by an intellectual message, a vision that the West, not only the West but many other parts of the world, bought into. There was a whole informal element of this without which it couldn't have happened. And then below that, and this is what I was really wanting to come to by starting at the structure, below that we've got something which we can't even name, which we can't see or define. I'm calling it social potential. We've got an unlimited reservoir of human potential which is not yet expressed. Aspirations which are not yet in action, energies that are not released, knowledge which we've not yet developed or shared or applied, potentials for learning, potentials for organization. And if we look back, what is that potential? Well, just think of 1800. All of that we've done in the last 2 centuries was a potential there of human beings. And if we look in 1990, when the Cold War ended and the Berlin Wall fell, we had none of us had any idea that within 5 years we're going to create a global social organization we called the Internet and the World Wide Web, and we're going to be living in a very different way than we did before. So we have a potential that's not fully utilized. And it's out of that all this has come, and whatever we're going to do to create more successfully in the future, it's going to come out of that unrealized potential. So what we look at with uncertainty or indefinable, as indefinable and vague, is really an unlimited potential. A theme that we're going to come back to in several sessions, an important theme is, apart from these layers of structure, we have another and I didn't know how to fit it into that structure. I think it's another dimension. There's another determinant of what society accomplishes. It's not only how much power we've generated and organized, it's how we've distributed that power, how we've distributed access to that power. Whether it's the political power of feudalism or monarchy or military dictatorship or democracy, or the economic power widely distributed or concentrated, the distribution of power seems to be a very important determinant of the final, or knowledge for that matter. Whether it's knowledge in a small, with a small group, or knowledge widely distributed, which is what we believe today. We want humanity, we want everybody to be educated today. We feel we're going to be better off when knowledge is widely distributed to the whole population. That wasn't always the view. So we're going to also look at this recurring theme of how the development and organization of power interacts with our willingness and capacity to distribute that power, to share that power. What is the impact of distribution? What is the impact of not doing it? What are the forces that restrict the distribution? And what are the strategies? And that's the last session on the third day, is how can we increase the development of the power and the distribution of this power for more total benefits to humanity. So, my last slide. During this time, we're going to be raising many interesting questions and exploring them. I'm listing just 7 here, which I think are recurring themes of our sessions. The first, what is the social potential that is the source of all the achievements of humanity over the last few thousand years? I've given it a name now, but that doesn't really explain what is that source. What are the determinants or limits to that social power? What at any particular time limits our capacity to harness more of it? Not only collectively, but individually. We all have a capacity. What is it that limits or helps us bring out more of our individual capacity and sharing it as participators in the collective? Why do societies differ widely in the capacity to draw on and organize this social potentially, both spatially, meaning we can compare, we always do compare countries at a particular point in time, but also temporally? What makes us better able or less able to do it now than we did it in the past? Each of our societies, or humanity, if we're doing it more today, what has made it possible for us to do it more than in the past? And one of the things that's been really clear to me reading Darwin, it's been clear before, but much more clear after reading the concise history of 600, the relative advance, leading edge of one society over another is a very short-term phenomenon in history. We can think of Greece, which ancient Greece was at its height for about 100 years. Rome longer. The British Empire, which with great deference to the British Empire, which was at its height in 1910, 1920, and nobody could imagine a world without it. By 1945, you had to hunt for what would be left. So what is it? We're not passing cultural judgments. We're looking at a phenomenon of society's increase and change over time. What is the impact of the distribution of social power, both legally and illegally, because they both do it, formally and informally, on the overall power of the society and its capacity for accomplishment? How can societies increase that capacity, increase the generation, the direction, the organization of social potential? That's really an underlying question. What is the role of the individual in this process? And how do societies empower more members to assess and utilize the available social power for individual benefit and collective benefit?